Welcome back to First and Cam. This is going to be our best bets episode of the week where we hand out cash every single week. Last week, if you tuned in, we were 4-2 against the spread, had an awesome week, and we forward to putting more money in your pocket. We have, I believe, five games together that we both want to pick on, opposite sides on some. And then Cam has a few best bets. I have a few, my name's Evan, as best bets as well. And ideally, we come out with a winning record. So, game one, I want to start with is USC on the road at Illinois. USC is a 6.5 point favorite. Cam, what's your pick here? What are you thinking? I'll give my opinion after.
I'm taking USC minus 6.5 easily. I think they're going to win this game by double digits. Illinois, to me, is just very disappointing. The game against Indiana exposed a lot. Luke Altmaier, I didn't like what I saw against him. And Jaden Maava, who is really having one of the quieter, better seasons in the country this year. He leads the nation in QBR, has, leads the nation in pass yards per attempt. And through four games is having a better season than Heisman quarterback Caleb Williams did when he was at USC. And so I'm taking USC on the road big, and I really expect them to kind of kick Illinois out of the top 25 for the rest of the season.
I agree with that. I think the only reason that Illinois is even a football, they are given a football score as a cover is because they were a preseason favorite. I don't believe that Illinois is actually a really good football team. I think they're going to be a solid Big Ten team. But when you start playing against the big dogs, which we figured out that Indiana is one and Illinois is not, you're going to get exposed. And so for me, I agree. I think USC, even though it's on the road, like we talked about, the weather is not going to be all that impactful this early in the season. If this was a late October game, way different. Early October would be a way different game, but not right now. So I'll take USC with you, and the points are to cover. I think this is going to end up being about a 14-point blowout here. Let's move on to Ohio State, Washington. This is a game where I think a lot of people aren't going to be paying attention, but you could look up when you're checking the stats, and this game is very close, and you almost can't find it on your TV network because you'll be watching something else. So in my opinion, I like Ohio State. They are a 8.5 point favorite on the road at Washington. Washington is historically a very difficult place to play at. I don't know that they have the same coaching caliber that they had before as far as talent goes. What I do know is Ryan Day is 6-0 off of a bye, and he has won his games by an average amount of 35 points. And so for me, this doesn't feel like a game where Ohio State is looking ahead. I think everybody's aware Washington is pretty good. And Ohio State doesn't have a game next week that we look at and say that's a huge matchup. And so I think Washington, unfortunately, got the draw of Ohio State, and unfortunately, double unfortunate that they have the full attention of the Buckeyes. And so I look at this as being a route 14 to 17 point win on the road for Ohio State.
I'm going the opposite direction.
All
I'm
right.
in the camp of late September football is when the upset city starts to happen. I'm taking Washington to cover at 8.5. Washington 22 game home win streak. And I'm not saying that Washington is going to win, but I definitely think they're going to cover. I wouldn't be surprised if they get a late game winning field goal or they win in some dramatic fashion. But I really do think that Washington is a way better team than what Ohio State has played recently in Grambling and in Ohio. Julian Sain has been the most accurate quarterback in the nation, but Washington is also second in scoring offense at 55 points per game. So Ohio State's defense, which has been tested this year, I do think that they will slow Washington down a little bit. I don't expect 55 points, but I do expect Washington to have their way a little bit, at least in the first half. Jonah Coleman, the running back, and Demon Williams are the two X factors I'm looking at. Coleman, who already has 9 touchdowns running on the year.
Hmm.
Demon Williams, who is 93.6 QBR, which ranks second in the nation. I don't think Ohio State's defense is going to give him too many fits. Yes, they have a great D line. They have Caleb Downs back there, but I do think Washington can keep this close, and I do think at least that first half is going to be close. And if it is close in the first half, I expect a really tight game going into the fourth quarter.
I think that Washington home field advantage could really kick in if it's third quarter and this game is within a score, or like you said, Washington has the lead. I wouldn't be shocked at that at all. Let's jump down to some of the premier games to run through. Let's look at LSU at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is getting, they are favored by 1.5 points here. Ole Miss at home. This is one of those games where you look back, and I think this could be a springboard for a Lane Kiffin Ole Miss team. They're kind of like the stepchild of the SEC. Like we acknowledge they're there, but we don't put them in the same category as LSU, as Alabama, as Georgia. And I think there's a case to be made that with the NIL money they have, the way Lane Kiffin's recruiting, the way that he's getting players to execute at a high level, I think they could be an A tier team in the SEC. I think this is the probably one of the first chances they have to make that exclamation point. And so I personally like Ole Miss at home. I think Trinidad Chambliss, which you were very early on, by the way. Kudos to you. That's why you guys tuned into the show. You were very early on him. I'm a believer in him. He's a starter over Austin Simmons this week. Give me Ole Miss, and I will lay the points.
I'm taking Ole Miss -1.5 as well, and because of the reason you just mentioned, Trinidad Chambliss, who comes in from Fair State, pretty much virtually unknown to the nation, and he goes to Ole Miss knowing he's going to be a backup quarterback, which kudos to him for going to that situation. Austin Simmons gets hurt, and the first thing that Trinidad does when he gets in the game is balls out, and he keeps balling out, and he keeps not turning the ball over. And LSU, who's going to throw some pieces at him, and they have a lot of speed, and their secondary definitely has upgraded from last year. I just don't think that LSU has played anybody like a Trinidad Chambliss. They played Cade Klubnik and Clemson. He looked horrible. Louisiana Tech, not the greatest. Florida, we saw what happened with DJ Lagway. He threw 5 picks and they still only scored 20 points. And then LSU just played Southeast Louisiana. I don't think they've played a dual threat up to this caliber yet. I think Trinidad Chambliss has the chance to really not only solidify his spot for the rest of the season, he has a chance to solidify himself on the Heisman ballot coming up. And that would be very unprecedented from a guy to go from D2 to the Heisman race. I just think that's a wonderful story. And I do think that Ole Miss has pieces around Chambliss to get the job done. And I'm just not impressed with LSU's offense. And we talk about Nussmeier being the most NFL ready quarterback. We haven't seen that yet. We have not seen that yet. And I do think that the dual threat ability of Chambliss and the design runs that he's going to get called for him, he's going to tear that defense up. And I really do think that I don't think this game gets out of hand, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss wins by, 8 or 9 points.
That's interesting. I think going back to Ole Miss in that roster, K'Wan Lacey, the running back, Harrison Wallace, the third, the receiver, and Dejon Stribling, the wide receiver as well. I think those three guys have a huge chance to be impact players on that offense. I don't believe in Ole Miss's defense at all. I really don't. I just happen to not believe in LSU's offense either. And so we just go to the games. LSU has played a gauntlet of a schedule already. Whoever made their schedule just did not care for their success. So Clemson the first game, Louisiana Tech only scoring 23 points there was a huge red flag. And then getting the 5 turnovers at Florida coming to their house and only scoring 20 points is big. You play a D1 AA school, you get 56 points, get your confidence back. I don't think it's enough. I think the thing about the SEC and the way that these teams are constructed is like we will stop the run, we will stop the pass, but if you have a quarterback that can run, then like everything else is broken. And I just happen to feel like that's another one of those games where LSU does everything right. Like they account for all 10 players on offense, and then the quarterback is just out there 10, 15 yards. It's third and long. Now it's first and 10 because he scrambled and got it, and he barely got the first down. I think that's exactly where this game ends up going. I just, I think I trust Trinidad Chambliss and his fifth year of playing college football. And if you go look at his D2 stats, they're insane.
They're gaudy. Yeah.
It's almost ridiculous. And so I think I trust him more than I trust Nuss. I think Lane Kiffin, this could be a game where we put him next to Brian Kelly. I don't know that I trust or don't trust a Brian Kelly coach team. I'm just not sure what I'm going to get. They're very inconsistent so far this year. And so I think we both agree that Ole Miss probably pulls this one out. And I think if Trinidad Chambliss ends up being a Heisman guy, you were probably the first person I heard call that. And I think you are definitely owed your credit. That's exactly why you guys watch, just to get the scoop like that. Next game we'll touch on that we both have a feeling on is Oregon at Penn State. This is going to be one of the cooler environments that we'll see in all of college football. Finally, Penn State plays a wideout. They did against SMU, I think it was, or whenever that was in the playoff, and it was just whatever. But this is going to be a real wideout against a real opponent. Dan Lanning and his crew going up to Penn State. My gut feeling on this one is Oregon wins it. I kind of want to hear what you have to say, and we can talk more about it.
Well, I'm taking Oregon to win. I'm taking them to cover that 3.5, but I'm also taking them to win. We talk about teams who don't look that impressive. LSU, Penn State looks way worse than them, and they've played against Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. And you're talking about Drew Aller, who's coming into the season as a top 2 to 3 quarterback on paper. He hasn't shown it yet. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Penn State's defense, yeah, they've only let up what, like 3 or 5 points this whole season, but it doesn't matter when you're playing against teams that wouldn't compete with FCS schools even. And
Mm.
so we talk about James Franklin not being able to win in these spots. Penn State is 4-20 against top 10 opponents under James Franklin. They haven't beaten a Power Four top 10 opponent since January 2nd of 2023, and that was Utah. And then on December 3rd, 2016, that's Penn State's last win versus a top 10 Big Ten opponent. And for those reasons alone, and how good Oregon looks and how good Dante Moore looks with the freshman receiver Decorium Moore, I expect them to win, and I expect them to go in there and kind of handle that game from the jump.
If that's okay, I agree with you. I like Oregon to win. The points, them not getting the points is insane. If they went into Penn State, into that stadium and won that game handily, I think that'd be the most shocking result of all that we're going to talk about today. I don't know that Penn State is a team where they're going to constrict you like Michigan was a couple years ago, like Ohio State does to their opponents. It's you might be a better offense than us, but we're not going to give up the big play and we're going to make you earn every single yard. Now, I think they have the quarterback edge in this one. They give up the running back edge for sure. They give up the running back edge twice, I think. And I think Penn State has a better defense. And I could probably be talked into taking Penn State, but from what I've seen from Dan Lanning, I think he's the kind of guy where he gets the most out of his teams, and I just don't want to see a Dan Lanning coach team against my team. So I will take Oregon. Alabama's a dog on this one. Georgia favored by 3.5 right now. That line keeps going up. I saw it as at 2.5, then 3, then 3.5. What are your feelings on this game itself? Who are you picking? And I'll get to my pick after.
So Georgia's favored by 3.5, and I want to push that to 5.5 because
Wow.
that's how confident I am in Georgia winning this game. Alabama is 6-3 against the spread in their last 9 games. Georgia, however, is 1-6 against the spread in their last 7 games. So that's an interesting stat to me. I just think that this Georgia team, after that comeback against Tennessee, that they're ready for the adversity that might hit them. And Alabama, who is kind of streaking right now, they had a good game against Wisconsin. They beat the crap out of Louisiana Monroe. They haven't played a team like Georgia yet. Yes, they got throttled against Florida State. I expect them to play better than that. My true question is how Ty Simpson is going to play because after the FSU game, he's looked great, completing 89% of his passes. He doesn't have a pick. Jam Miller is coming back, and he's going to make his debut to help out that 102nd ranked rushing attack. Ryan Williams, who has definitely picked up some steam lately, had a good game against Wisconsin. And then Jeremy Bernard for Alabama, who I think is their best player on offense, who's averaging 18.3 yards per catch. I think they pose a really tough challenge for Georgia. I just think the running back room for Georgia, the improvement of Gunnar Stockton, and then Kirby Smart as the coach just rallying that team, I think it's going to be too much. And I expect Georgia to win by a touchdown. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that.
Yeah, there are so many storylines to this. I like that pick. I too am going to take Georgia. However, here's both of these teams are off a bye, so they both unfortunately get the best version of the teams that they're going to be matching up against. Kalen DeBoer has Kirby's number, at least we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer wins the big games. I don't know what it is about him and playing bad opponents and just losing, but when he's locked in and that team and they're playing a big game, for whatever reason, he's got whoever it is his number. And so I wouldn't put it past them. I think this game profiles very similar to the Georgia Tennessee game, where we have two good offenses. I think that will show off. When I picked Tennessee, I thought to win that game against Georgia. We didn't bet that one, but I just had a feeling. I didn't think I could trust Gunnar Stockton and that offense. And I thought they couldn't run the ball, and I thought that Gunnar Stockton would just be an okay passer. And it turns out that he's actually pretty freaking good, and the kid can get it done. Kirby said he grew up after the game, which is cool, but like this game feels very similar. Gunnar Stockton has the experience of doing it in the playoff last year. Ty Simpson, well, Alabama wasn't even there in the playoff, but he didn't get any reps with this. So I look at this Georgia offense as if they could score 40 a game, and I just hope that they could get a stop. But I would love to see Alabama win this game. If Kalen DeBoer wins, I'll be happy to lose money by taking Georgia. But I will take Georgia and the points. I'm not going to go up to 5 or 5.5 like you are. I'll take what Vegas gives me, and that's good enough. I will take Georgia to win by just a bit more than a field goal. Now, Cam, you've got a few games that you thought you got some edge on as well. So why don't you run through those, kind of what you're thinking? Actually, you just go one, and then I'll go one. So
Yeah.
give me one that you're starting on, and we'll go from there.
So Tennessee 7.5 over Mississippi State. Now
Mm.
Mississippi State is 4-0, but I think Tennessee after that Georgia loss showed us that even within a loss that they are legit. It could very well be their one loss of the whole season. I just like what Aguilar has been showing. He's already got 1,100 yards in the season, 12 touchdowns. I just think Tennessee is going to go into Mississippi State and really handle it. You know, they're going to take a conference game really seriously. In the SEC, you have to take these conference games week by week because
Mhm.
nobody's really a slouch. On paper, they might be, but when you line up the ball and you go 11 on 11, these games are a lot different than what we always predict. But I'm taking Tennessee with the points. Could be a 10-point victory, could be worse, but I definitely think they're going to get the 8.
I think so. I think if there was a game where you were going to pick Tennessee to be a big favorite, this is the one. Next week they play Arkansas, and then they play play Alabama right after. And so if there was a look ahead game, it's not this week, it's the following week. And I think Mississippi State doesn't have the advantage. We talked about this when we talked about Miami and South Florida, where it was like South Florida could pull off the upset, but they unfortunately beat Florida, and so they're not sneaking up on anybody anymore. I think Mississippi State being undefeated so far, they're also not sneaking up on anyone. And so I do think Tennessee goes in and handles business. I do like that pick a lot. My pick here, my first that's separate from the few that we talked about before, is Florida State is minus 7.5 at Virginia. At least that's the line that I saw most recently. I'm taking Florida State on the road. The line doesn't look the line looks crazy if you're not following college football, but if you know your stuff, you know ball. Virginia is one of the most explosive offenses in the country. They are unbelievably talented on that side of the football. Unfortunately, they really can't stop anybody, which is also not great for them.
Right.
But I look at Florida State as being a team that's very well put together. I think Mike Norvell is sitting in a spot where he goes, I had this same type of setup a couple years ago and I lost my quarterback. I'm not going to take my foot off the gas. I'm not going to relinquish anything. This is actually a Friday game. So Friday at 6 o'clock p.m. So I'll probably all get to watch this one. I will take Florida State to cover the spread here and win. And I think this is one of those games where they run away with it. I don't think it's Indiana and Illinois, not that kind of game, but 7.5 points probably isn't enough for me to feel comfortable with Virginia as they have given up 20 points to Stanford. They played William and Mary, gave them 16 points. Virginia, they played our NC State beat them as well this year. NC State's not a very good football team, so I will take Florida State to cover. What is your next game?
And that is Georgia Tech minus 13.5 over Wake Forest.
Wow.
Georgia Tech obviously has Haynes King, one of the more popular, tough quarterbacks and players that we have in college football. From what they've shown this year, and then from what they have at the rest of the schedule, you're looking at a team that could very much run the table the rest of the year. And they beat Colorado by 7. That's the closest game they've had all year. They beat Clemson, which turns out that Clemson, not even ranked anymore, is probably not going to be any good this year. Look at the rest of their schedule. They just have that Georgia game sitting at the very end of the season. So I expect them to just keep on building and building and building momentum until that final week comes. Because obviously last year they had the 8 overtime game against Georgia. So they're not scared of them anymore. They know that they can compete with the best of the best. And I think they take it 1 week at a time. They're favored 13.5 points. I could see that being 21 points at halftime. I think Wake Forest got a new coaching staff, got a lot of new players. Just don't think it's going to mesh very well. It's an 11 o'clock game, or I guess, noon on the East Coast. And I think Georgia Tech jumps on them early. I think they take care of business not only this week, but at least until that November matchup against Georgia.
I agree with you completely. I think that Georgia Tech has the opportunity to run the table. I think you look at a Wake Forest team, and we know personally having a sibling at Washington State being on that team who might get some reps this week, Donovan Fitzmaurice, that shout out to him. That coaching staff essentially went to Wake Forest and took a lot of players with them. And it's yet to be seen how that will gel and how that will fare up against what I think to be is a really good and really well coached Georgia Tech team. I think Brent Key could end up being one of those coaches where he ends up at a program in the Big Ten or the SEC where he's getting paid huge chunks of money to like turn that program around, like an Arkansas kind of job. He's probably not a big enough name for what's out there, but he's a head coach where you can't sleep on him. I think that his team is very disciplined, and that team can beat you any kind of way. On the ground with Haynes King, like you said, or over the top. Their backup quarterback's also very good. He's just a better thrower of the football. So I certainly agree with you on that pick. I like that pick a lot. My last pick outside of the ones that we've capped so far is Indiana. It's actually on the road at Iowa. Indiana is a 7.5 point favorite. I don't know if Iowa can score 8 points. And so for that reason alone, I'm going to take Fernando Mendoza and his Heisman caliber season so far and Kurt Signetti to cover in a humongous way. If it's anything about James Franklin, like he makes sure he covers and he wins the games that he's supposed to win, Kurt Signetti will beat the brakes off he'll beat the brakes off your grandmother if you let him. And so I look at this as being one of those games where Iowa gets a couple stops, but they're not scoring. Indiana gets stops, and then it's a turnover here, a big touchdown there, and all of a sudden you look up, it's 21-3, and this game's way out of reach. And so they're waving to the kids in the hospital, but this game is over with.
Right.
That's how I feel about that one. To me, it feels like the game of college football has passed him by, not so much
Yeah.
in the recruiting, but in the style of play. I don't think that there are very many coaches. Nick Saban did a great job of it. I think Kirby Smart has done a great job of it, where they're able to adapt the play that they want to see with the play that's required to win in college football. I don't feel like Kirk Ferentz has done that. I feel like another coach that's a prominent coach in college football that is kind of in the same boat is Dabo Sweeney at Clemson. I think his play on the field is one thing, but not being willing to really dip into the transfer portal and like get rid of guys that you recruited, even though you might have missed on a few of them. I think both of these are head coaches. Mike Gundy was, to be fair, he just got fired this week. Like he's another guy where like you have old ways, they're not dying and they're not evolving and they're not winning you football games. And so I don't know how you feel about the coaches as far as across college football who haven't grown and matured, but in my opinion, Kirk Ferentz at Iowa is another one. I don't know that they're going to be able to go out and
I
hire
think
somebody.
the thing is that NIL is exposes is that guys who are not progressive and guys who are not willing to transform their identity as a coach, because not only do you have to get better at the X's and O's, you have to get better at relating to these kids and
Mm.
kind of pandering to what they want. And Iowa fans are only going to lose for so much longer before they say, hey, we need to play keep up. Because the team upstate in Iowa State, they're winning games. They're ranked in the top 25. And so we've never really known Iowa State to be a more premier program than Iowa. Certainly not in basketball, but this past decade, it's kind of flipped on Iowa, and they've been low on both ends of the spectrum as far as football and basketball. And so my thing is can Iowa even, like you said, score enough points to keep up in this game? And I think the answer is just no.
Flat out. And to go back to your point about evolving and relating to players, you and I both play college football. You play college basketball as well, which is insane. We all know that coaches, especially in college and how it has been, they are the ultimate control freaks, especially in college. It is their way or the highway. And with the NIL and some of these players at bigger schools, some of these players have a little bit more control, or like, I have money now. I don't really need to do what is required, or I can transfer at any point if I don't like what I'm seeing. I think it's hard for coaches who like grew up in that system of like they were GAs and they were beat up a lot, and they were assistant coaches and they were beat up a ton, and now they're the head coach and they do the same thing that they were taught. I think that old way of coaching has kind of gone to the wayside. And if you're not winning, if you're winning, people will deal with it. We let Dabo do his thing for a long time, but like now his way isn't working. Kirk Ferentz the same way. I don't know how long Iowa puts up with that. I don't know how you replace him, but I can't have my opponent or my rival Iowa State shining and going to the Big 12 championship while I'm getting the brakes beaten off me by second year Kirk Signetti, who came from James Madison. So
Right.
I'm with you. Do you have a last pick that you would leave us
My
with?
last pick is Texas A&M minus 6.5 over Auburn. I think that's a lock. I really like Marcel Reed. I can't talk enough about how good Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver have been and how good those guys will be at the next level. I think you've got two first round NFL receivers in college on the same team right now. And I think you have Marcel Reed, who is a sophomore, who's only going to get better. And then you've got an Auburn team who's kind of beat up a little bit. And then coming off that loss at Oklahoma, I think this kind of the start of a trending down for Auburn. Looking at Texas A&M's roster and what they've done this year, and then going back to that Notre Dame game, I don't think Auburn matches up even close to Notre Dame. And for that, I'm taking Texas A&M minus 6.5.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's one I'm going to leave you on an island with. It's not that I don't think Texas A&M is a better team. I think they are a better team. I think they even have a better roster, which is awesome for them and how fast Mike Elko could like revamp that whole thing. My issue with that number is I haven't seen Texas A&M be consistent. I know they have great players. I know Marcel Reed is good. He's coming into his own. I love to see that for him. I just don't know if I'm going to see the same team that I saw against Notre Dame. I don't know, and I don't believe that I will. What I do know is Auburn knows exactly who they are as a football team. Versus, I didn't think Texas A&M really knew who they were. They got forced into being a passing team, and so I think they wanted to run the game. Le'Veon Moss is on that
Yeah.
roster, by the way. I just thought that Texas A&M thought they would be a running football team, and then they had to pass. Versus, I think Auburn knows Jackson Arnold, buddy, he's not great. He cannot pass the ball. And we're going to run the ball as much as we can. We're going to run it with him. And if we have to throw it, we're going to throw it to the one guy we feel like who's probably the best receiver in college football, not name the two guys you just named. So I think Auburn really knows their identity. I think Auburn has a chance to muck this game up and make it just ugly. And then next thing you know, Texas A&M has no rhythm. Those deep shots aren't connecting. The run game isn't there. And Auburn, to be fair, they had a touchdown taken away off of what could have been a fumble six. I picked uh Oklahoma to cover. Actually, they got a safety, which is insane. That's just money in your pocket, but got lucky on that one. But they could have fumble, they turned into a touchdown. They got called back as a tackle. And then they had the play where the Oklahoma receiver, which just kind of stood on the sideline and then went for a touchdown. It's like, that's 14 points right there. That should not, that should have been counted on 7 and shouldn't have been counted on the other side. And so I look at Auburn like, that's actually a pretty good football team. They got one bad break. I wouldn't look at them being unranked against Texas A&M as any sleep. So that's one I'm staying away from, but I hope it's right for you. All right, so let's recap these picks here as we conclude this episode of Your Best Bets. We'll start out with the Ohio State-Washington game. We are a house divided on this one. I have Ohio State covering the 8.5 and winning in a big way. Cam has Washington covering, so one of us will be right, hopefully. You make some money on the one that you choose, or maybe just bet both and have it as a wash. The next game we talked about was LSU at Ole Miss. Ole Miss with a 1.5 point favorite here. We both took Ole Miss on this one. I think we both agree that they had the better quarterback, had the more experienced or more explosive offense. And I don't know if how much defense is going to matter in that game. Then we have Oregon on the road at Penn State. We both chose Oregon. Dan Lanning team. They don't play down in competition. James Franklin, it's hard to go from cold start to hot fast, and I don't know that they can do it. And then we have Alabama going on the road to Georgia. Even though we both love Alabama, we're going to take Georgia at 3.5 points. Cam said 5.5. So if you find that line somewhere, you can still take it. But we'll take Georgia at home. And then Cam, you are taking Tennessee as an 8.5 point favorite on the road at Mississippi State. That's one. I am taking Florida State as a favorite of 7.5 points on the road at Virginia. It'll be a fun game to watch. Cam, you're taking Georgia Tech, excuse me, as a 13.5 point favorite is it at Wake? Is that right? Mm-hmm. At Wake Forest. And so that's going to be, that's a lot of points. I'm taking Indiana at Iowa, 7.5 point favorite there. And the last game, Cam, that you mentioned was Auburn at Texas A&M. Texas A&M as a 6.5 point favorite at home. That'll be a fun game to watch as well. A lot of good football this weekend. If you guys haven't already, make sure you subscribe, like the video, stick around, put it in the comments whether you agree with us, disagree with us. If you make money with us, put it in the comments. If you lose money with us, unsubscribe and don't talk to us. But either way, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of First and Cam.